toutes et à tous, merci d'être venus si nombreux en cette heure matinale pour cette table ronde dont je vous rappelle le titre, l'entreprise au chevet de l'ascenseur social. Je vais vous présenter nos participants. Jean-Pierre FARANDOU, PDG de la SNCF. Antoine FRÉROT, président du conseil d'administration de Veolia. Dominique de la Garanderie, ancien bâtonnier de Paris, premier bâtonnier de Paris. Benoit BAZIN, directeur général de Saint-Gobain. Nicolas NAMIAS, président du directoire de BPCE. Vous aurez l'occasion de leur poser des questions une fois qu'on aura entamé ces échanges. Et c'est vous, Patrick ARTUS, qui allez introduire les débats pour le Cercle des économistes.
Merci Isabelle. Bonjour à tous à cette heure matinale. Oui, ce que je vais faire, je vais introduire ce sujet de la mobilité sociale et je vais donner 2-3 chiffres qui sont assez révélateurs du problème de la France. Et puis j'essaierai d'expliquer d'où vient ce problème français de faible mobilité sociale. Et puis enfin, je dirai quelques mots en introduisant les exposés qui vont suivre sur ce qu'on peut attendre des entreprises pour améliorer la mobilité sociale. Alors, il y a plusieurs manières de mesurer la mobilité sociale. En général, les économistes retiennent 2 façons. D'abord, l'évolution de la catégorie socio-professionnelle entre les parents et les enfants. Et plus précisément, puisque ça fait remonter beaucoup dans le temps, vous comparez la situation de présente à la situation d'il y a 40 ans. Et comme il y a eu une très forte hausse du taux d'emploi des femmes, on compare plutôt la situation socio-professionnelle des pères à la situation socio-professionnelle des fils. Alors, quand on fait ça en France, on s'aperçoit que 28% des hommes occupent une position sociale supérieure à celui de leur père et 15% des hommes ont une position sociale inférieure à celle de leur père. Donc il y a une amélioration tendancielle enfin, il y a une mobilité sociale faible, une amélioration tendancielle du niveau social des personnes, mais elle est extrêmement lente. Et par exemple, vous avez un autre chiffre, je ne vais pas vous assommer de chiffres, presque 60% des fils d'employés ou d'ouvriers sont employés ou ouvriers. Donc il y a vraiment un très grand immobilisme social et j'y reviendrai. Alors il y a une deuxième mesure qui était extrêmement intéressante, je crois, du degré de mobilité sociale dans un pays, qui est la corrélation entre le salaire des pères et le salaire des fils. Et là, il y a vraiment 2 groupes de pays. Vous avez des pays où il n'y a aucune corrélation, c'est-à-dire le salaire des pères ne présume en rien du salaire des fils. Alors, par exemple, l'Australie, la Norvège, la Finlande, le Canada, la Suède, à peu près l'Allemagne, voient cette situation où il y a vraiment une décorrélation entre le salaire des pères et le salaire des fils. Et alors, la France, malheureusement, est dans le groupe des pays où il y a une très forte corrélation. Il y a une corrélation, enfin, très significative, avec d'autres pays, avec le Royaume-Uni, avec l'Italie, avec les États-Unis, mais la France est un pays où le salaire des pères donne une très bonne prévision du salaire qu'auront les fils. Donc retenons que, quelle que soit la mesure de la mobilité sociale en France que vous utilisez, vous concluez que la mobilité sociale est faible, que la situation sociale des personnes s'améliore, mais extrêmement lentement, et qu'il y a vraiment un très grand immobilisme social. En perspective, on peut craindre que cette situation ne s'améliore pas. Si vous prenez les travaux de France 2030, qui sont très remarquables sur les perspectives de l'emploi en France, vous voyez que les 3 professions pour lesquelles il va y avoir le plus de création d'emplois sont les chauffeurs de bus et de camions, les aides-soignantes et les aides à domicile. Et donc, il n'y a probablement pas de perspective, compte tenu de cette structure prévisionnelle des emplois, d'amélioration forte de la mobilité sociale. Alors, d'où vient cette faiblesse de la mobilité sociale ? Je crois que cette faiblesse de la mobilité sociale vient très largement du système éducatif. Et vous avez des caractéristiques du système éducatif en France qui sont extrêmement défavorables. Et si vous regardez, par exemple, les enquêtes PISA qui ont été publiées en 2023, l'année dernière, on voit que la France, d'une part, a des niveaux de compétences des enfants en lettres, en mathématiques, en sciences, extrêmement faibles, mais surtout que l'écart de compétences, alors on mesure cet écart de compétences par la différence du score PISA, l'écart de compétences des enfants entre les enfants qui sont, l'OCDE utilise le terme, socialement favorisés, c'est les enfants de familles bourgeoises, éduquées, etc., et les enfants qui sont socialement défavorisés, est parmi le plus élevé dans tous les pays de l'OCDE, qui font l'objet de cette enquête. Et vous avez d'autres enquêtes qui sont absolument effrayantes. Il y a l'enquête TIMSS sur le niveau en sciences des enfants, où il y a un seul pays pour lequel le niveau en sciences des enfants est plus élevé que la France, c'est la Géorgie. Et tous les autres pays ont un niveau en sciences des enfants très supérieur au niveau en sciences de la France. Donc je crois que l'école est un endroit de reproduction sociale. L'école n'améliore pas le niveau social des enfants par rapport à celui de leurs parents. Probablement, soit elle est neutre, soit même elle dégrade légèrement le niveau social des enfants par rapport à celui de leurs parents. Alors, pour terminer, alors le constat quand même est assez accablant.
On a compris.
Et alors, évidemment, il faut distinguer les grands groupes qui font des efforts de formation, on va le voir, les PME, mais je crois que la France est un pays donc, où l'immobilité sociale est très forte. Cette immobilité sociale est largement due aux déficiences du système éducatif. Et je crois que les entreprises ne peuvent pas attendre que le système éducatif s'améliore. Et donc le devoir des entreprises est de se substituer au système éducatif pour embaucher des jeunes qui ont quitté l'école, comme plein d'entreprises qui sont présentes sur ce plateau le font, pour les amener à des diplômes, les amener à un emploi, parce que le système éducatif français s'est continuellement dégradé depuis le début des années 2000, et ça sera un très très long travail de l'améliorer. Et donc c'est un devoir des entreprises, en réalité, de se substituer au système éducatif défaillant pour essayer de réduire cette mobilité sociale. Et il y a un autre débat, qui est un débat aussi entre économistes, qui est le rôle des allègements de charges sur les bas salaires. Il y a un débat pour savoir si les allègements de charges pour les bas salaires ne bloquent pas les salariés à un niveau de salaire bas qui convient essentiellement, qui donne à l'entreprise donc ces allègements de charges. Et donc peut-être qu'il faut réfléchir aussi à l'évolution de ce régime, de cette situation où au niveau du SMIC, on a pratiquement une suppression des charges sociales, ce qui fait un piège à SMIC, quoi, je veux dire, un piège à niveau de salaire pour les salariés. Donc voilà ce que je voulais dire, qui n'est pas très encourageant en introduction.
Merci beaucoup, Patrick, pour effectivement ce constat. Est-ce que vous le partagez, Jean-Pierre Farandou? Est-ce que vous pensez que le système éducatif français est effectivement défaillant? Et est-ce que vous pensez que c'est votre rôle, vous, comme chef d'entreprise, du surcroît d'une entreprise publique, de pallier ces défaillances?
Oui, bonjour à tout le monde. D'abord, on est sur des sujets lourds et graves. C'est important parce que derrière, il y a des concepts. Alors, les mots sont pompeux, mais on va les traduire. Ce sentiment qu'ont les gens d'être assignés dans leur position, de ne pas pouvoir se développer, de ne pas pouvoir grandir, ça tue l'espoir. C'est pas bon de tuer l'espoir. L'espoir, c'est très important, mais il faut le réaliser. Et deuxièmement, et on voit aussi, ça peut faire écho à ce qu'on entend, parce qu'il y a ce moment un peu particulier dans lequel on fait ces rencontres, ces moments d'élection en France, cette notion de déconnexion. On l'entend pas mal en disant les élites sont déconnectées. Et c'est vrai que quand on stratifie les classes un peu quelque part dans une entreprise ou dans un pays, on voit qu'il y a un problème entre les élites, les dirigeants et la base. Si on ne se parle pas, si on ne se connaît pas, on a un problème. Voilà. À la SNCF, j'allais dire, on a l'habitude, on a de la chance en fait. Et on est vertueux un peu par construction, puisque l'éducation nationale, même quand elle marchait bien, elle ne nous formait pas les conducteurs de train, elle ne nous formait pas les aiguilleurs, elle ne nous formait pas bien les mainteneurs de la voie ferrée, les mainteneurs de nos TGV. Voilà. Donc au fond, on sait ce que c'est que recruter pour former. Et nous, dans le recrutement, d'ailleurs, bien sûr, il y a quelques bases minimales, mais le savoir-être compte de plus en plus. Voilà, donc au fond, ça donne toute sa chance à tout le monde. Ça, hein. Ce qui compte, c'est l'envie, c'est la personnalité, c'est un attachement à ce métier, un attachement à l'entreprise. C'est ça qu'on va rechercher. Et donc, on met le paquet effectivement dans la promotion interne. Je crois que c'est une des grandes forces de notre entreprise. Un chiffre, on ne va pas abreuver avec des chiffres, il y en a un qui est spectaculaire. 80% de nos cadres sont issus du collège d'exécution. Donc ils ont fait un parcours, ça veut dire qu'il y a un nombre très important de nos collèges d'exécution, nos ouvriers.
C'est quoi un collège d'exécution?
C'est la base, voilà, c'est les ouvriers, c'est les agents aux qualifications les plus faibles. Hein, voilà. Souvent ils grandent comme ça et après ils se développent. Donc deux manières de se développer. On se développe déjà même dans la carrière par les qualifications. En gros, même sans passer des examens et des concours, on arrive quasiment à doubler son salaire sur une carrière.
Vous êtes l'exemple parfait d'ailleurs de la promotion interne.
Exactement. Et surtout, on a toujours très vivace dans l'entreprise, des examens, des concours. C'est ça qui fait que 80% des cadres sont issus de ces emplois de base. C'est très important et c'est ça qui assure la non-assignation et la non-déconnexion. Voilà, non-assignation puisqu'il y a un vrai espoir de progresser. C'est pas un espoir, c'est une réalité. Alors ça ne va pas tout seul, il faut travailler, il faut bosser, il faut accepter une mobilité géographique parfois. Il y a des contreparties, hein, mais elles existent et c'est très important. Et deuxièmement, c'est la non-déconnexion parce que ces cadres qui sont issus du terrain, ils le connaissent. Donc quand ils vont prendre une décision, quand ils vont manager des équipes, ils auront ce vécu de leurs équipes. Et je vous donne un exemple un peu personnel, vous m'en excuserez, mais au moins, quand j'ai pu évoquer, vous savez, ce fameux accord qui a fait beaucoup parler de lui sur les fins de carrière à la SNCF.
Allez-y.
Non, mais je ne vais pas parler de l'accord, mais surtout, j'ai pu raconter la pénibilité. En quelques mots, j'ai pu expliquer ce que c'était de faire 30 ans de 3-8. Hein, j'ai expliqué que quand vous vous levez pour embaucher à 4 h du matin, il faut se lever à 2h15 pendant 6 jours de suite, ça pique un peu, vous voyez. Et j'ai pu l'expliquer parce que je l'ai fait. Pas longtemps, certes, il faut que je reste humble, mais je l'ai fait quelques mois. Et ces quelques mois où je l'ai fait, c'est très présent dans ma tête. C'est-à-dire le fait de l'avoir vécu, c'est plus de la théorie. Donc le fait que les dirigeants d'une entreprise aient pu, même si c'est peu de temps, vivre la vie des salariés, surtout dans ces métiers à pénibilité forte, je pense que c'est important. C'est un élément de déconnexion, de connexion à l'inverse dans l'entreprise.
Donc c'est-à-dire, pardon, juste pour compléter, c'est-à-dire que c'est votre rôle de promouvoir la promotion interne, justement, et également de compenser les difficultés de carrière, la pénibilité, c'est aussi votre rôle comme chef d'entreprise. Et cet accord, effectivement, dont on a beaucoup parlé sur les fins de carrière au sein de la SNCF, en est l'exemple.
Oui, ça en est l'exemple. C'est-à-dire qu'effectivement, la SNCF, c'est une entreprise. Alors certes, on n'a plus le statut, etc. Mais quand même, il y a un attachement très fort, vraiment très puissant, entre le staff et les dirigeants, quoi. Je veux dire, le mot de famille est parfois prononcé, il faut se méfier, mais quand même, c'est pas faux, quoi. C'est une entreprise où les dirigeants, et moi le premier, on se sent en responsabilité par rapport aux gens qui sont chez nous, à nos salariés, à nos cheminotes et nos cheminots. Voilà, en responsabilité, ça veut dire leur faire une carrière, leur faire un parcours. Ça, c'est le sujet de la table ronde. Et là, vous me tendez la perche, donc je vais y répondre. C'est aussi prendre en compte ces 30 ans, ces 35 ans de contraintes personnelles qui usent. Franchement, faire des matinées, des soirées et des nuits. Il y a les agents de la maintenance de la voie travaillent quasiment que la nuit. C'est de plus en plus le cas pour le matériel. Donc vous dormez le jour, vous travaillez la nuit. Même physiologiquement, on sait que c'est pas très bon. Il y a des agents aussi qui ne dorment pas chez eux tous les jours. Quand vous avez des enfants adolescents, c'est pas toujours simple d'abandonner le foyer pour régler les problèmes. Vous voyez, donc ces contraintes-là, c'est normal qu'on les prenne en compte. Voilà, donc c'est vrai que cet accord, il a eu deux effets. Bon, là, je ne vais pas trop rentrer parce que je vais dépasser mon temps. Mais en tout cas, pour revenir au sujet principal, je crois qu'encore plus une entreprise publique, mais un groupe privé, ça serait la même chose. Nous, on a un groupe de main-d'œuvre. Hein, on a 150 000 cheminots qui travaillent pour l'entreprise. Il est très, très important, effectivement, que ces cheminots se sentent bien dans l'entreprise. Pour se sentir bien, cette notion de progrès. Alors, il y a deux types de progrès. Le progrès individuel, la promotion, mais on pourrait aussi parler du progrès, l'ascenseur horizontal, on l'a appelé comme ça. C'est tout ce qui est progrès social collectif. Voilà. Et ce que vous évoquez, cet accord que vous évoquez, il participe aussi d'une promotion latérale, je veux dire collective, où tout le corps social progresse. Voilà, donc vraiment là, les piliers de notre politique RH, et c'est ça qu'on met en place à la SNCF.
Merci beaucoup. Antoine FRÉROT, alors il y a plein de sujets sur lesquels on pourrait vous interroger. Moi, j'aurais bien choisi l'apprentissage, parce qu'on vous connaît notamment pour votre rôle dans la promotion de l'apprentissage. À la tête de Veolia, à la tête de l'Institut de l'entreprise également. Et est-ce que, finalement, vous avez eu ce sujet tellement à cœur parce que vous connaissez justement toutes les défaillances du système scolaire dont a parlé Patrick, et parce que vous vous dites que ça fait partie de votre rôle de chef d'entreprise, de chef d'une très grande entreprise, de pallier justement ces insuffisances?
Bonjour à toutes et à tous. Tout d'abord, Je vais répondre à votre question, Isabelle, mais j'aimerais revenir un petit peu sur les propos liminaires de Patrick et sur l'ascenseur social en général. Patrick a évoqué la promotion sociale entre les générations. Mais l'ascenseur social, c'est déjà à l'intérieur d'une même génération. Et lorsque l'ascenseur social est en panne, eh bien, c'est une société qui, comme l'a dit d'ailleurs Jean-Pierre, c'est une société qui désespère. C'est une société sans futur pour cette génération-là. Et le sans futur, c'est, je pense, un peu la source des populismes. Patrick a cité des chiffres en France. Il y a des chiffres aux États-Unis qui m'impressionnent encore davantage. Parce que les États-Unis, c'était le pays où on rêvait de l'ascenseur social au sein d'une même génération, que tout était possible. Or, des scientifiques, professeur à Columbia d'ailleurs, si je me souviens bien, a montré que l'ascenseur social aux États-Unis était totalement en panne. Et je pense que ce n'est pas sans lien aussi avec la montée des populismes. Alors, bien évidemment, l'entreprise a un grand rôle. Parce que qu'est-ce que c'est que l'ascenseur social au sein d'une même génération? C'est d'abord la promotion interne dans l'organisation où on travaille. Bon. Et les entreprises sont les organisations de travail les plus nombreuses. Et donc la promotion interne à l'intérieur d'une entreprise, ça me paraît extrêmement important. Extrêmement important pour le moral et l'espoir des salariés, et extrêmement important aussi pour la cohésion sociale à l'intérieur d'une entreprise. Et pourquoi cette mobilité sociale est-elle en panne? Elle est d'abord en panne par, je crains un petit peu, par facilité.
C'est-à-dire?
Parce que pour promouvoir en interne, il faut préparer les gens à prendre un nouveau poste, un nouveau job. Il faut les former. Et parfois, c'est plus simple d'aller trouver à l'extérieur quelqu'un de tout près, de tout fait. C'est toujours un peu difficile psychologiquement de promouvoir quelqu'un à l'intérieur de l'entreprise à cause des jalousies à l'intérieur des groupes de travail également. Et que donc, pour promouvoir quelqu'un, il faut généralement pas le promouvoir à l'endroit où il était avant, au milieu de ses anciens collègues, il faut le bouger. D'où les problèmes de mobilité. Or, les mobilités, ça coûte, il y a le travail du conjoint, et pour organiser des mobilités suffisamment nombreuses, pour faire la promotion interne, il faut l'aider, il faut que l'entreprise aide la mobilité. Au moins les déménagements et sans doute un petit coup de main pour le relogement. Bon. Tout ça fait que, à mon avis, effectivement, par facilité, par aussi affaiblissement des postes intermédiaires qu'on appelle des postes de maîtrise, parce que pour la promotion sociale, il faut...
For such promotion, we need to move up step by step. And then we need to go up to higher levels. So there are a lot less businesses working in this area, and we're facing all kinds of challenges. So internal promotion suggests that there needs to be a lot of work within the business, but at the same time, it contributes to a great deal of social cohesion. When a business can train its own leaders, its own managers, they are better recognized, and hope for other people within the business that they might manage to reach these higher levels adds to the commitment that people have to the business. Now, if we come back to the question of training, of course, in order to promote, you have to be able to train. I don't agree with Patrick that French schools have really deteriorated. This is not the right place to talk about this. It's a huge subject here. I don't think that level in France has really dropped, despite what's being said generally. But I'd need a lot of time in order to explain my perspective on this. But what I can see, and this is something that's not new, it's something that was already the case, our educational system doesn't suit everybody, and that's always been the case. And there's always been around 20% in each age group that are not really very comfortable in this training system with this quite abstract educational approach. And about 20% of students don't really manage to get on with this very well. And so this has always been the case. And they used to leave school without qualifications. Before, without qualifications, you could still get a job if you wanted to work. And then people would learn on the job. Now, if you don't have qualifications, you don't get any job. And that's the real issue. And this is where apprenticeship comes in. Because if the abstract French education system doesn't suit those people, a different system, such as work-linked training, where we have times in a workplace where we're being supervised, and then we have more theoretical lessons, and we go between those two things, and we can see that young people who didn't really enjoy the standard approach to school, we can see that they progress much better. This work-linked training system is one of the ways. There are other ways, of course, but for this percentage of the population of young people, it's really very effective. You know that in France, it was used very little in the past, but recently it's been developed. We have 700,000 young apprentices now. Actually, it's 1 million now. 1 million is what Patrick was saying. So, whereas it was 200,000 not very long ago. And yes, we could go into the figures around this, but in terms of these the others who are not doing work-linked training, they are also working on internships, etc. So for businesses, this is really an excellent mode for recruitment, because if you can test young people, it makes it possible to see whether they're ready and then also to integrate them into the business. It also provides a lot of training opportunities for young managers, because when these young managers come to places of management, because with Veolia we have lots of staff and lots of people in management positions, and we can see that these young managers are much better and much more relaxed in management when they've come in through apprenticeship. That's why in Veolia we have an approach where we use apprenticeship to recruit a lot. We have about 2,000 young people in apprenticeship every year. What was it the day before yesterday? We're opening up our second campus of an ecological training school. We're opening up in Paris very soon. So businesses really do have a role in refocusing on making internships possible and using its employees to support young apprentices and for social mobility and for qualification and for these young people. Thank you very much, Antoine FRÉROT. Dominique de la Garanderie, I would be interested to hear from you as a lawyer. What should businesses do? What can they do? There are some restrictions on them. It can't do whatever it wants. It can't recruit anyone. It also really needs to be able to align with quotas. There's also male-female parity issue that needs to be focused on. So what ecosystem and in what environment can business work? Good morning, everybody. Actually, I would rather take it from a different approach, in that I think that, of course, we need to think about education within schools and high schools and higher education, but the role of businesses is set by the law, and therefore the whole role of social responsibility of businesses is covered by a series of legal texts which puts in place real restrictions and requirements for businesses who have to put in place training plans, plans for ensuring supervision, for ensuring there's professional equality, putting in place indexes. So there's going to be a new system that's going to come in place, the CSRD, which is a new measures that are being imposed on businesses. It's a CSRD directive, and this is becoming more and more sophisticated with international proposals that have been adopted by the largest corporations that are all represented here. And then in France, we make it into a legal text, and then we go out to the European level in order to develop competitive. Is this a good thing? Does this mean that businesses are not necessarily virtuous in their own right, or do you think actually this is too restrictive for them? Yes, this is restrictive for them, but they are effective. They're effective because they're well-equipped, because they've got different services working together. We've got a very cross-cutting activity here. There's the environment, social aspects all working together. HR and the financial branches are all working together. It means reorganizing businesses. It's also a new requirement of employees, because when I read about the introduction to this roundtable, it's also about the reaction of those who are most affected, i.e. those who are working. And so for what does promotion for that mean for them? Well, they will see salary, working conditions, but also meaning. It's also this question of meaning. I heard you saying earlier that we have internal promotion, and that we know that if we're at the SNCF, we know that we can have a career that has meaning for young people. They know they've got a future. However, social mobility involves a number of different levels, and when you are sort of halfway up, it's not sure that you're going to get to the top. So training, I won't go into details in terms of the legal text on training. It's very long, very boring, and really very complicated. Is it effective? Well, Mr. FRÉROT just said, yes, it is effective. Yes, but Mr. FRÉROT leads a big corporation. Yes. Is it adequately effective? Perhaps not, because what I was hearing yesterday in some of the roundtables is that we really need to have a very individual approach, which is both varied and also really very delicate, very sensitive, so we adapt to the expectations of each person, of what they're able to do, and help them to choose the right training course. This is something that's really very difficult, and as you were saying earlier, the real challenge is this rivalry within categories. We still think in France in terms of professional categories. We can't break down these categories for a whole number of reasons. And here, businesses have a real ambition and a real obligation and a real approach to successfully moving this area forward. Benoit, BAZIN, I heard you agreeing about the reduction of on charges. So I'd like to hear from you about that. Is it true that lightening up social charges on lower salaries don't slow down social mobility within businesses? Well, I might have my opinion. For me, yes. That's the case. I think we have the lowest gap between the lowest salary and the median salary in France, in the OECD. There's a popularization of the civil service in France. So in the past, it used to be teachers earned 2.5 the salary of others, whereas now it's 1.5. 1.5 times. Perhaps I could come back to another issue linked to the social mobility. Industrial jobs. Industrial jobs are already in place in the territories. We can see services working in different large metropolitan areas. Industrial jobs are there. It's them that can work through the territories, present our activity, and present the way of living together. Before we have social mobility, businesses are a place where we live together, we have inclusion and shared values around a common strategy. And it's a place where people are really at the center, because that's what helps us to succeed. Because occupational health and safety is something that's really important, for example. So in terms of inclusion policies, policies where including the gaps between male and female pay, I think we have in Saint-Gobain, we have 2,000 apprentices. We've got a whole number of them who've ended up on a whole number of management levels. We've got 2,000 sales outlets around France, and 80% of the managers here started as salespeople. So it is the middle class that is the foundation of our democracy. We've seen in the United States populism rise. It's because there's been a destruction of the middle classes in the US, and that's what the IRA law was about that Biden put in place, because he wanted to restore the middle classes. So I really think that social mobility works when we create a narrative. Yes, so we need to live together better, have better community, but all of this, these are necessary preconditions, but we also need to create a narrative, and we can do that through social dialogue, where people have a sense that they're being heard. So that means trade unions. It's also about sharing values. We want to also help all of our employees. We have 75% of our employees who have become shareholders in our business, and it's a way of including them in the success of our business, and it helps them in their career and also the development of their living standards. We also really need to listen to our employees. We do every year a satisfaction survey. We have 87% of our employees who listen to that across 75 countries. So that means that we're really listening to our staff, and we want to really include everyone in our success, because if we're not connected, if people aren't in the social mobility process, they're not going to be able to move forward. So what we want to do is making the world a better home. It's all about sustainable development, and so we decided to train 80% of our staff on the climate fresco, and we've trained over 50,000 workers. We have a night shift, and they stop 3 hours early, and they learn about the climate fresco. So they are drawn into the social narrative of the business. And so there's this collective narrative that businesses can develop. Thank you very much, Benoit BAZIN. Nicolas, NAMIAS, you agree that we need to give meaning, we need to create a collective narrative, a positive narrative. You're a bank, you're the bank of the squirrel, which everybody knows, it's everywhere. Is that part of your job as the leader of a business? Yes, of course. I'd like to talk about social mobility through what we're doing in businesses, what we're doing with BPC and a number of different banks. But perhaps we could take another approach. If we think about social mobility within what we're doing within our business, we have 100,000 staff at BPCA. It's what we're doing for society and also for our customers, because this takes us back to the question of the narrative, because we can see that the key fundamental issue of social mobility is focused on a perception of the loss of control of life by everyone and by most people. We can see that all of these transitions, the environmental transition, technological transition, demographic transition, all of these transitions, they are incredible. They create amazing opportunities. But at the same time, we really need to listen to people. For most people, this transition gives people a sense of loss of control. So when there's a sense of loss of control, there is no longer any social mobility. So I'm really convinced that wherever we are, and that's what I really want for BPCE, our fundamental mission is to give everybody the power to act on their future, to give everyone the opportunity to face the future with confidence. That's our fundamental mission in terms of social mobility, and that includes what's being done internally, but it also includes what's been doing for society with our customers. The bank, because yes, I lead a bank. This is our fundamental mission. We're seeking to support everyone in developing their future. If there was no banks, the world would be totally static. Imagine how, without banks, a family would manage to buy a house. It would be impossible. It would simply be a question of inheritance. So without banks, what would businesses do? They would be limited to the capital put in place by the family of the business leader. It's just a case of reproduction. But banks make it possible for us to go beyond reproduction and help everyone, give everyone the opportunity to build their future. That's the first aspect of social mobility. Once we've said that, then we need to do this in a universal way with all of our customers, regardless of their living standards. Together with all businesses, from the smallest to the largest business, we need to make it possible for everyone to build the future. That's the key for social mobility. That's why with BPCE, we have a 2030 vision. We have objectives for 2025, but we have a 2030 vision, and this vision sets out a number of different priorities. The first priority is accommodation and housing, because building your future and developing social mobility, that starts with housing. This is a real priority. That's why we want to be innovative in terms of funding housing. There's so many solutions. I could really talk about them. That's the first priority. But the second priority is about the competitiveness of territories. Why? Because if there is a concentration of wealth and activity in a limited area of a territory of a country and French territory, that immediately prevents social mobility in the regions and in territories. This is why the competitiveness between territories, through the competitiveness of SMEs and infrastructure across the territory, is once again the foundation stone of social mobility. That's one of our first commitments. Our staff, of course, are absolutely key, but before that, it's about what we do for society and for our customers. And then, of course, there are our 100,000 staff. There, of course, social mobility is about recruitment. We really need to be engaged in commitment. We recruit about 20,000 staff every year, 18,500 precisely. So, and 9,000 of them are permanent contracts every year. Antoine was talking about work-linked training. We recruit 4,000 work-linked training interns every year. That's a real commitment to recruitment. But before recruitment, there's internal promotion, which is really essential. We have the same figure, as has already been mentioned. 80% of supervision of managers comes from internal promotion. So this is internal development. But I really want to insist on the fact that we all have strong policies in terms of internal social promotion. We need to have those. That's the case for BPCE. That's the case for everyone who's talked this morning. We are really aware of the importance of this. But I think that social mobility goes beyond our policy for recruitment and training. That's important. But first of all, social mobility is about giving everyone all around France the opportunity to act and to face the future with confidence. That's the key for social mobility.
Dominique de la Garandrie.
Dominique de la Garandrie, I think you wanted to pick on that, and then we'll come to your questions from the floor. If I may, I'd like to talk about what I'd call the social transition. What you've been talking about is genuinely a social transition. That is, our societies are changing and they're expressing their needs, as well as people are expressing their needs. And this also has to be factored in companies. That's why we're talking about integration, diversity, non-discrimination, gender balance, and decent wages, decent salaries. That's true. That's something we've brushed upon recently. Now, you'll be given the opportunity to ask your questions. If you have any questions, we have roving mics. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Ask the question in English, if it's okay.
Pas de problème. Je crois que tout le monde
No problem.
cette table ronde.
Fernando Morales de la Cruz. I'm a journalist and I have investigated misery and child labor in supply chains. And I think it's extremely important, and when we talk about corporations, we also study the impact they have on their supply chains, because it's not only about the ascenseur social inside of the company, but also in their suppliers. And we can see misery in the supply chains of French companies, even in rural France. And this is absolutely unacceptable. So my request to all of you, perhaps for next year, is that we actually look at the negative impact of corporations in their supply chains. Just recently, there was a study published about the 2,000 largest corporations. They have $45 trillion in revenue. And most of them are actually having a negative impact in their supply chains. So this is something that is making the Sustainable Development Goals fail, and it will, in the end, also make a negative impact in France, in Europe, and in the clients of France and Europe internationally. Thank you.
Benoit Bazin, je crois, de Saint-Gobain.
Benoit Bazin from Saint-Gobain. So the question was the impact of companies on the supply chain. Negative impacts, but also positive impacts. We operate in 75 countries, and we have a country organization because what we're working with is the local supply chain. We produce in India for Indians. We have hundreds of young women that we train every single year in India without any education. We have 34 billion euro value added on the supply chain. We have 2 billion in credit lines for the crafts. So companies have this due diligence obligation, but we didn't wait for the law to tell us what to do and to behave correctly. And we're improving in the regions in France. What's true in terms of social mobility in France is valid as well in India, Brazil, Vietnam, and other countries. So, of course, we behave in the same way. What we want is to promote people, to hire them, to train them, and to respect our suppliers. We measure respect for our own staff, but also the temp work, the agency workers, and others as well. What you're saying is straight to the point. That is, companies have to pay attention to this, and this is what they're doing. All those who are present today, and we have very positive impact as well. As Nicolas was saying, in the regions with his clients, we're present locally, and we do lots of things locally. And thanks to this, our regions are up and running smoothly. Well, of course, we have to do a good job, as you said, and we have a very strong impact. When there's an industry job, that means 5 other jobs connected to this industry job. So this is what we do. We have to highlight in a positive way, and we have to do this throughout the world. Any more questions, please, from the audience? Oh, by the way, could you tell us who you are? Which is what the gentleman did before. It's always interesting to know who's who. Hello. I'm Ben Satem, I'm 26. I'm a student in the town of Marseille in a business school. And I was at the Aide Sociale à l'Enfance, social support associations, to help young children. What really helped me is mentorship. I had a sponsor, you see, or mentor, who was working in a company, and he'd come once a week where I was, and I could have a little chat with him. We could go out, and someone off the beaten tracks. This really helped me. This was a very good support for me to start my studies. And so I have a question to ask you. There's the Taquet bill, a decree or executive order that was out in 2024 that says that mentorship should be organized for all those who have social support. So what about you? You're the heads of large corps. So how are you going to help these youngsters that are going through massive difficulties? Thank you for asking. This is very much in keeping with what we were talking about before, that is, companies that are here for social mobility. No, that's a different type of question altogether, I'd say. This is another type of mobility in society, I'd say. I can tell you what we do at Veolia, and then the other companies might step in. Well, at Veolia, we have a series of support measures for our people. And amongst other things, we have something that's quite new, which is each person who works for Veolia can take a number of days off, working days off, so that they would focus on some type of support they want to give to associations or society at large. And the company pays them, of course, support given to the youth, but other types of social actions as well. As you know, our business at Veolia is the ecological transformation, so things like protecting the environment, associations that protect the environment. That's one example. And therefore, our people, apart from their job, can do something else. And within their professional or development, they can help others out. They can do this for a couple of days annually. And okay, Nicolas NAMIAS, would you like to add something to this? We have a question here. I won't be long, but I'd like to build on that. Antoine has described what they do at Veolia, and I think we all have this type of commitment. We at BPC, we do this with the co-op banks and the savings bank. Now, I think you mentioned as well a new law, a legal obligation we have in France, and you did this as well, madam. You mentioned the new legal instruments that exist. No, that's all very nice, but frankly, we shouldn't wait for the law. That is, companies should act. We have this corporate social responsibility. It's our commitment. We don't need to wait for the law to change, either legal or the regulation. These commitments that we have in terms of social mobility, but more generally speaking, in the field of ESG, these are the ones that are not connected to the law. Otherwise, we would just abide by the law. I must insist on this. We're all very much aware of this. All this conversation that we're having this morning goes beyond the law. I must insist on this because given how complex the world is today, and in state-owned companies, I think that the large corporates have this role, which is not connected to governments. And I like taking this example. On a Monday morning, we never know what's going to happen during the week. What I know at BPC is that the 100,000 people we will be here for the 35 million clients we have. We'll give them the loans they need. Whatever happens on the Monday morning, we are not connected to the law in this case. We have our own company commitments. Now, as far as social mobility, and no, we'll take another question. Let me answer. Antoine, please, order. The law doesn't say much. It's corporate plans that have their plans in terms of social mobility. The law doesn't do much. Madam, please. We're going to take another question. Hello. I'm the CEO of a small limited company, 12 people and 12 million in revenues. Thank you for saying that. Thank you for what you're doing as well, and the human touch that your companies have. I have a question, which is, don't you think we should think about mobility the other way around, or to have a shortened type of social mobility? Something that would be more easily reached. Because when I arrived, I saw there was a hotel not far away, and there were 3 splendid trucks there, or vehicles to bring people here. And I thought, well, what's the point? We have to be careful about the environment. Everybody's looking at your large companies because you're the leaders of the world, but couldn't we go a level down? Couldn't we do things more smoothly at a lower level? Because what we need to do is to be quite practical and think about the planet. But anyway, congratulations for what you're doing in and for society. Could we perhaps redesign things together at the different levels of social mobility? Well, Jean-Pierre FARANDOU, that's what we all want, madam. You're right. We have to have ideals. That's true. Let's be careful. We need to dream and have ideals. That is, living well together. There was a panel discussion on happiness, I think. This is what we want. That's true. We are large corporations. We have our own level of responsibility, but we're doing our best to see where we are. And that means there are different stakeholders. We have clients. We are a company, either state-owned or not. We produce services and goods. We need clients to buy them. Otherwise, it's the end of the story, and the end of the story for our own people, the clients and our employees, our staff. We are all responsible for our people, our employees, and the quality of people, and our HR policies are changing. We have both the group level, but the level of individuals. We care for our people and individuals and the regions where we are. We are deeply rooted in our regions. This is what we want. So what we try and do is do our best for people to be happy. And this is what I stand for. We have to dream as well and have ideals. Madam, what you're doing is really good with 12 employees. You're doing as well as we're doing. Right, Patrick, the final word, perhaps. Right. I think we've talked about many things. What about the SMEs? We didn't have anybody to represent SMEs, so we had someone who asked a question for the SMEs. Maybe they have a word to say. They have to help us. They could perhaps provide us with more solutions, or they pose a problem. Anyway, and deindustrialization is something which is awful, because then the middle class is doomed to disappear, is bound to disappear. If we don't want to have this polarization on the labor market, we need to refocus on industry. Thank you very much.